Welcome to Creative Movies Recapped. Today's recap is a 2009 thriller titled Exam. Watch out for spoilers. Before we continue, kindly subscribe to support our channel. 8 individuals are getting ready for the same job interview. The exam room is spaced out with only a piece of paper and a pen on each table. The exam sheets are all labeled in numbers, from Candidate 1 to Candidate 8. The 8 candidates arrive and get settled in the room, with most of them looking quite nervous. Moments later, an armed guard arrives, followed by an invigilator. The invigilator informs them that only 8 of them succeeded, qualifying for the final stage, which will determine who gets an employment contract from the organization. He further makes it clear that there are no other rules in the room except their own rules and proceeds to explain only 3 rules. Rule number 1. Anyone who tries to communicate with the invigilator or the guard will be disqualified. Rule number 2. Anyone who spoils their paper accidentally or intentionally will be disqualified. Rule number 3. Anyone who chooses to leave the room for any reason will also be disqualified. The invigilator states that there is only one question that demands only one answer. He then asks if there are any questions before they begin, but the 8 candidates remain silent. The invigilator sets the timer, giving them 80 minutes to complete the test, and leaves the room. With pin-drop silence, each candidate turns their paper to begin the test, but the papers all turn out to be completely blank. Confusion arises among the candidates except for one candidate wearing a pair of glasses who appears to be reading something in the paper. As each individual tries to think hard, one frustrated Asian woman picks up the pen and begins writing, explaining why she deserves the job. A camera zooms in on her paper and the guard approaches her. The Asian woman informs the guard that she is yet to finish her test, but the guard proceeds to forcefully drag her out, ignoring her pleas for a second chance. The door later shuts and the armed guard returns to his position. The rest of the candidates are petrified, but one young man attempts to talk to them. The young man reminds them that if they make any communication with the guard or the invigilator, they would be disqualified, but the invigilator did not forbid them from speaking to each other. The candidates are now convinced and start a discussion to figure out the question and the answer. The young man assigns each of them a nickname based on their physical appearance: black, white, brown, blonde, brunette, dark, and deaf. He then tells them that they need to work together to establish the question, but Brown disagrees, stating that they are all competing. A while later, they all agree to work together to first figure out the question and instead compete to answer it. They then discover that moving around the room is neither forbidden. Brunette suggests that maybe the question is written down but with invisible ink, hence they just need something to reveal it. Brunette holds her paper against the light, but the paper reveals no writing. One by one, the candidates hold their paper against the light, but the paper remains blank. All along, Deaf remains quietly sighted and engulfed in his thoughts. They try to reveal the hidden text in the papers by placing them in front of tubes of ultraviolet light surrounding the room. They then break the tubes, but none of the different lights enable them to see a hidden message on the paper. With 60 minutes left on the clock, Blonde suggests that the question may be visible if they trace the paper. Black warns her, as she risks being disqualified for spoiling her paper. White then recalls that the rules clearly stated, one would only be disqualified if they spoilt their paper and not for spoiling another candidate's paper. White decides to trace the disqualified candidate's paper, hoping to see a hidden text on it. They still fail to reveal the question and instead attempt to spill liquids on the same paper, but none of it works. They all start arguing in frustration until Deaf begins weeping and stuttering in French. Deaf vaguely explains that he can see himself in the paper and all they need to do is see clearly. Meanwhile, Deaf tries to put together some pieces of glass on the paper. White stops Deaf from speaking further, convinced that Deaf is mentally ill and makes no sense. Brown states that it is no coincidence only 4 women and 4 men, specifically all from different ethnic cultures and backgrounds, qualified for the final stage. He goes on to explain that the whole situation is not an exam but rather a game, and the organization board is betting on who will win and having fun while closely watching. Dark, who claims to be a professional psychologist, responds that there is no board working together except the CEO, who's watching them and manages everything alone. She adds that they are all special, hence the selection process is not an ordinary one. Brown suspiciously looks at Dark and begins questioning her on how she seems to be the only one who knows everything about the organization. Brunette walks towards the guard and searches through his pockets for something that could help them. The guard remains still and Brunette manages to find a lighter. She suggests they use the lighter to set off the fire alarm, which is likely to produce something other than water, which may then reveal a photograph that shows the question. Brunette stands on the table but is still unable to reach the fire sprinkler using the lighter. White offers her the disqualified candidate's paper. Brunette burns the paper and the sprinkler goes off, but only produces water, which fails to reveal the hidden message on the paper. Minutes later, they discover that White tricked Brunette into spoiling her paper. The guard drags Brunette outside the room as she yells, criticizing White. Black angrily attempts to confront White for the selfish behavior, but White shows no remorse. Once again, Def starts weeping and trembling. White begins making fun of Def and bullies him into tearing his paper and eating it. The guard throws Def out of the room, and in the process, Def accidentally leaves his glasses behind. White still shows no remorse but expresses satisfaction with the fact that the competitor's number has gone down. As tension rises, White comes clean that he lied when he first told them to work together and states that lying is not against the rules. Disgusted by White's behavior, Black tells White not to expect any more help from the rest of the candidates in establishing the question. The arrogant White informs Black that he already figured out the question all by himself and does not intend to reveal it to them. Black suddenly knocks White unconscious, ties him to a chair, and puts a gag in his mouth. Black then suggests they slide White out of the room to get him disqualified as payback for ejecting the two candidates. Brown tries to convince Black that he will only be contradicting his own gospel of collaborating by acting selfishly, and there will be no difference between him and White. Black refuses to listen and proceeds to drag White out of the room with the help of Dark. Blonde stops them as she recalls the Invigilator, saying only if anyone chooses to leave the room shall they get disqualified, and not if anyone else chooses for them. Black then attempts to force White into spoiling his paper, but White refuses to fall for it. Tension continues to rise with only 30 minutes left on the clock. White tries to speak and Dark eventually ungags his mouth. He starts pleading with them to untie his hands so he can take a pill from his pocket, claiming he needs to take the medication after every hour. Black refuses, accusing him of attempting to trick them. In response, White pleads with Black to take the pill from his pocket instead, and give it to him, but Black appears to still doubt White and is convinced he is just putting on a show. A few minutes later, White passes out. Dark states that White is only manipulating them and could be faking the whole incident because he portrays all the characteristics of a narcissist who is just looking for sympathy. As time runs out, questions arise on who can be trusted and the candidates begin turning against each other. Brown turns to Dark with claims that she is working for the organization. Brown grows suspicious of Dark, who appears to know more about what the organization does, including the organization's board. Dark responds that she only did background research about the organization before she applied for the job. It is gradually revealed that the company is responsible for a miracle drug designed to treat a virus afflicting a large part of the population due to a viral pandemic. Blonde reminds them that they are just wasting time trying to prove who among them is guilty and who is innocent. She attempts to convince them to maintain trust and cooperation before time completely runs out, but none of them agree to it. Brown forcefully ties Dark to a chair and begins interrogating her as Black and Blonde stand aside in curiosity. Dark only reveals that she works for the organization and heard about the job vacancy and applied like the rest, adding that no one put her in the room. Brown is still not convinced that Dark is telling the whole truth and in response decides to torture her. Brown discovers self-harming scars on Dark's thigh but proceeds to harshly inflict more pain. Black attempts to stop him but Brown violently knocks him aside. Brown proceeds to torture Dark and attempts to forcefully push a paper into Dark's eye. Blonde tries to talk him out of it as Dark begs Brown, revealing that she really knows nothing more than what she already told them. Brown is eventually convinced that Dark is actually telling the truth and sets her free. Just then, White starts convulsing. Black reveals that convulsing is a symptom of the virus as his wife died from the virus and he is also a carrier of the same virus. Everyone is now convinced that White really has the virus and needs his medication or else he ends up dying. Blonde begins looking for the pill in White's pocket but fails to find it. She suggests that they all search each other for the missing pill as they can't trust each other. The pill is still not found but Dark appears highly suspicious of Brown. Dark manages to find the pill wrapped in gum under Brown's table. Brown tries to convince Dark that White does not deserve their sympathy and only needs to face his own karma. Just before Dark feeds White the pill, Brown knocks it off her hand and it ends up falling in a drainage. Unable to pull out the pill, White's condition gets worse and Dark states that the only option is to take him to the hospital for treatment. Blonde and Black refuse to take the risk of getting disqualified for leaving the room, but Dark proceeds to drag White outside. White suddenly starts nose bleeding and convulsing. Black and Dark begin panicking, not knowing what to do. Dark results in speaking to the Invigilator through the camera and asks for his help, hence disqualifying herself. The guard eventually throws her out. Blonde manages to pull out the pill from the drainage using a pin and feeds it to White. White eventually regains consciousness but appears furious because of the suffering he went through before they decided to give him the medication. Blonde eventually flees White. With only 10 minutes remaining on the clock, Brown demands for White to reveal the question. White claims that there is no question and that the company can only hire the last person left in the room since there is only one vacancy available. White attempts to grab a gun from the guard, but Black manages to grab it away from him. Black holds White at gunpoint and threatens to shoot him. After minutes of negotiating, Black pulls the trigger, but it turns out only the guard's fingerprints can work on the gun. White gets a chance to attack Black and eventually stabs him in the arm with a pen. Brown tries to intervene, but White knocks him down as well. White grabs the gun and, using the guard's fingerprints, he threatens to shoot everyone else unless they disqualify themselves by walking out of the room. Brown willingly walks out of the room and leaves. Blonde pretends to walk out and distracts White, hence Black gets the chance to grab the gun from White. The lights suddenly go out and White randomly shoots in the dark as he panics. Once the lights are back on, White discovers that he accidentally shot Black. White notices Blonde hiding in the hallway and her foot partially in the room. Just before he gets to her, time completely runs out on the clock. White addresses the Invigilator and declares himself as the winner and more deserving of the job. The guard approaches White and reveals to him that the time is still running on the clock, hence he already disqualified himself when he talked to the Invigilator. He then recalls that Def had earlier removed a few minutes from the countdown clock, so the 80 minutes are yet to expire. Feeling disappointed, White attempts to commit suicide, but the gun of course needs the guard's fingerprints. The guard eventually leads him out, leaving Blonde behind. Blonde notices Def's glasses on the floor and recalls that Def was using the pair of glasses and a piece of broken glass with an exam paper earlier. Looking through the pair of glasses, Blonde finds the phrase "Question 1" on the paper, written in small print. Blonde realizes that Question 1 refers to the only question that the 8 candidates were asked by the Invigilator at the beginning of the test, which was, "Are there any questions?" Blonde answers, "No." The Invigilator enters the room and explains that Def is the CEO of the company. He is a troubled but genius scientist who has discovered a pill to heal wounds really fast. Blonde says that she may not accept the job. The Invigilator asks why she went through all that trouble if she did not want the position, and Blonde points to Black lying on the floor and says that it's unacceptable. The Invigilator reveals that Black is not dead and the bullet that hit Black contained the fast healing pill meant to revive him. Blonde approaches Black and is shocked that the bullet wound is almost healed. The Invigilator goes on to explain that with high demand for the drug and a limited supply, the company needed an administrator capable of making tough decisions with attention to detail while showing compassion, all traits that Blonde displayed during the exam. They all witness as Black rises and Blonde eventually accepts the job. Hope you've enjoyed today's recap. Don't forget to subscribe. Thank you for watching.